Hello, welcome to the channel. I've built a couple of guitar speaker cabinets over the years, such as this one back here. It has a 12-inch speaker and a 10-inch speaker. And this one down here, which used to have a 12-inch speaker in it. And in doing so, I've always had to cut these large diameter circles into the wood. In this video, I'm going to show you how I do it and a couple of simple tools that I've made to help me do it. This method will use the following items: a router with the base removed, a straight cutting bit, a thin piece of wood which will be used as a marking tool, a thicker piece of wood, this is 1/2-inch ply, it will be used to mount the router to, and this will be our cutting tool, a nail, a power drill, a very small drill bit, no bigger than the nail, a pencil to mark the wood with, and of course the board that you will be cutting your hole into. The thin piece of wood is used as a marking tool. I have drilled small holes in it. One end is where the nail will go through, and that is our anchor point, and the other end is where you would put a pencil in and draw your lines. I like to mark the wood so I can see clearly what it is I'm going to do before I actually start cutting. This 1/2-inch piece of plywood is used to mount the router to, and the bolts go underneath to mount the router to the top. It has a large hole cut here. I have a set of Forstner bits, but any way that you can cut a big enough hole for the router bit to drop down through is all you need. And then again, small holes here for the nail to go through to use as our pivot point for cutting out the hole. Now, a word of caution here. I carefully marked this wood to get the center of the router bit, and straight down this line I marked off different distances for different radius for the holes. Before I drilled out these holes though, I realized that the router bit has a certain width that goes beyond the center point. So you need to compensate by adjusting these holes up slightly to bring the center point of the router bit in closer. Hope that makes sense, but you can see here I wrote on here adjusted for a 1/4-inch bit. So the cutting bit I'm using is a 1/4 inch. I needed to move the holes 1/8 of an inch closer. Always measure first. This speaker here is 10 inches on the outer side of the mounting plate, but on the inner side it's about 9 inches, and the cone is well less than 9 inches. So even though it's a 10-inch speaker, we're going to be cutting a 9-inch hole, 4.5-inch radius. The next step would be to take the board you're going to cut your large hole in and determine where the center point of that hole is. I have an X mark here. I've already drilled a small hole and inserted a nail through it, and that will be the pivot point for our marking tool and for our cutting tool. So let's draw some circles on here and make sure everything looks good before we start cutting. I'm going to draw a 9-inch hole. So on my marking stick, this end goes over the nail, and my pencil goes in the 4.5-inch hole. Okay, now I'm also going to draw a 10-inch circle, and this is just for a reference because I'll mount the speaker from this side and I'll be able to see the outside circle and have it lined up right. So here is the 5-inch hole. I'm going to draw a 10-inch circle. Now next we're going to need to mount the small router to this, and we'll use these holes as our pivot points, and I'll have it on the 4.5-inch hole, and we'll cut through here. And if all goes well, I should cut right to this line on the 9-inch hole. We should still see the 10-inch circle drawn on the outside. I'm just out in the garage. I'm going to throw a blanket down on the floor. That's to protect the wood and to keep it from sliding around as we cut. Now before we get started, I just want to also point out, very important to use a straight cutting bit. Nothing that's rounded or tapered or has a collar on it of any kind. It's just a straight cutting bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my cutting bit to a very shallow amount. I'm going to just barely cut into the wood to get it started. I'm looking at 1/8 of an inch or so. I'm going to lock it down. Now I'm going to place my hole that's marked at 4.5 inches over this nail. There it is. Okay, here we go for the first pass, and I'm just leaning on the excess board here to keep it from moving. And I'll lift up on the router slightly and turn it on. There's our first cut. I do have a dust collection vacuum, and that comes in pretty handy. Okay, I got my gloves on now too. Should have done that to begin with. Going to adjust the depth slightly deeper. Now you could truthfully just cut all the way through this in one pass. I've done that before, but ended up being a little bit sloppy with it. It's back on there, and here we go for our second pass. Lift up on the router, switch it on. Lower it gently. I would say on that second cut, I'm probably about halfway through the wood. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull the nail out and switch it over from this side. I'm going to cut from the other side. That way, when the final cut breaks through, it won't be on the outside of either side of the wood. It'll be in the center, and it'll make for a cleaner cut. On this side of the wood, I don't have any reference lines, so make sure you put it on the right hole. Here we go. Lower it down. Okay, I'm not quite all the way through. It's got to be getting very close. Lower the bit slightly and see what that gives us. Here we go. Will this be the final pass? And we are through. There's a more or less perfect 9-inch hole cut into this board. The edges are a little rough because it's plywood. You can just go over the edges with some sandpaper and you're good to go. So I sanded around the edges with my little mouse sander on both sides. It's nice and smooth now, no splinters. And we have an almost perfect 9-inch hole cut out. I say almost perfect because there is no perfection, especially in woodworking. I still have my 10-inch circle drawn as a reference for mounting the speaker, because when you put the speaker on this board, you can't see the hole. So the reference line helps me ensure that I get the speaker centered exactly in the hole. Something like that. Now another word about mounting speakers. I always mount them from behind. The speaker, the ones I buy, have either a foamy layer across the front, or some have had cork, so it's a little cushion for mounting. But you can also mount the speakers. You can drop them in the hole and drive the screws in from the front. That can be done too. I have yet to do it that way. But with a 10-inch speaker and a 9-inch hole, you could go either way with it. The only other thing I want to mention is that the router I'm using is a laminate trimmer. It's essentially just a small router, and actually I purchased this many years ago and I've never used it to trim laminate. But it's pretty handy for jobs like this. But any kind of router will do. You just have to remove the base from it and drill your mounting holes in this board, so it'll go through there. Well, thanks for tuning into my channel today and joining me in this video about cutting large diameter holes. I hope it was helpful. If it was, please give me a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel. Hope to see you again here soon. Until next time, I've been James Caldwell. Thanks.